Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at classicstoday.com, here with, well, a chat. I was thinking back the other day because we talk about, how I first encountered composers, and you share your thoughts with me and how we got into the classics and all of that stuff. Those are all delightful things. But I wanted to take it back a step if possible and ask you, what is your very first musical memory? I really thought hard about this, and as I gave it some thought, it came to me that probably the things that I remember from the earliest period in my life that were musical were television commercials, because you hear them over and over and over again, and because you hear them constantly, they get stuck in your head. And the one that I really think is the absolute earliest that I remember was a television commercial for Colt 45 malt liquor. Now, of course, I didn't know it was Colt 45 malt liquor, but the commercials kept going on as I got older. And I remember the tune because the commercials were very funny. I remember the commercials too, but from the early 60s, I mean, I could only have been 2 or 3 or 4 years old, and they always involved something crazy happening with a guy who was sitting completely nonchalantly at his table having his Colt 45 as like all hell was breaking loose around him. And he was accompanied by this lackadaisical little tune that went like this. It went, something like that. And that tune is still stuck there where it originally got embedded back in the early 60s. And the other commercials that I remember really very vividly, as well as some children's television, which we'll get to in a minute, but there was Schaefer beer. Do you remember Schaefer beer? Those of you who are American? Schaefer is the one beer to have when you're having more than one. Remember that? There was that thing. They always had male choirs singing these sort of butch male product songs. Now, why was I 3 years old or 4 years old watching Schaefer beer ads? Well, I wasn't. What was happening was that my father was watching sports and I was watching my father, or I was stuck in my playpen or my crib or wherever the hell it was while they were watching sports. And of course, you had beer ads. And so beer ads, I remember Schaefer, I remember Rheingold, I remember Ballantine, and they all had tunes. Everyone would sing about them because, of course, the adage in advertising is if you don't have anything to say, then sing it, because they're all the same. The other ad that you probably most of you never saw was for a place called Palisades Amusement Park. Now, the Palisades Amusement Park was in Fort Lee, New Jersey, well, just outside of Fort Lee, New Jersey, on the Palisades. The Palisades is that large cliff on the Hudson River, which overlooks Manhattan from the George Washington Bridge on down. And there was an amusement park. And they had this ad. It was on constantly. It was come on over. Palisades from coast to coast, where a dime buys the most. Palisades Amusement Park swings all day and after dark. It went like that. Ride the coaster, get cool with the waves in the pool. You'll have fun. So come on over. That was the tune for Palisades Amusement Park when I was a little kid. It was in black and white, which tells you how old it was. And I always wanted to go there. And I always said to my mother, can we go? You had this big pool. Can we swim in the pool? My mother would just look at me and say, no, people go and pee in that pool. You're not getting in that pool. It's a public health disaster. So we never went to Palisades Amusement Park, and I never got into the pool. But I remembered the theme song. Now, aside from television commercials, of course, there was children's programming. And children's programming is full of cute little ditties. I mean, it'd be nice to say that I remember my mother gently rocking me to sleep, singing me lullabies, but my mother never did that. My mother read me stories. And we listened to her records, which were often classical music, quite often, or Tom Lehrer records, or other things, too. But one of the things that she didn't do quite often was sing, because she had what was known as the Goldberg curse. People in her family don't sing. You may notice I have the Goldberg curse, or at least to a degree, part of it. So my singing is not of the best either. So so we didn't really do We really didn't do lullabies, but we did Broadway musicals because my mother loved Broadway musicals and she had fantastic album collection, or I thought then, of Broadway musicals of all kinds. We had The King and I, we had, The King and I was one of my favorites, and we had, let's see, what else did we have? Oklahoma, and we had Paint Your Wagon was a big one. And the other one, the one that we listened to the most, was The Roar of the Grease Paint, The Smell of the Crowd, The Roar of the Grease Paint. And oh boy, did I know those songs. There is a beautiful land where all your dreams come true. It's all tied up in a rainbow, all shiny and new. And it's not easy to find no matter what you do. I can do the entire album from The Roar of the Grease Paint. Where would you be without me, governor? With Anthony Newley, and, that was from the 60s, and that one also got embedded in my brain. And then the other memory I have, and this has nothing to do with specific themes and tunes, was my father, because my father was musically very gifted. I talked about him before. I did a video about my father, sort of a tribute to him, when I found all of his old piano competition awards after he'd passed away. And because he never talked about it, and he had a very bad experience thanks to my grandmother playing the piano, and so he didn't discuss it very much, but he was very musical. And I was a sick kid. I was sick all the time. I had asthma, and I was always coughing and hacking and choking and staying up all night waiting for doctors who made house calls in those days to show up and give me adrenaline shots and whatnot. And my father learned to play the guitar so he could sit with me and stay up with me as I was up trying to breathe, and it really sucked. But he learned to play the guitar, and I just remember him sitting by my bedside when I was very, very small, playing the guitar. For me, as I was awake and feeling crappy, and then he did that for me, and I never forget that. It's one of my very earliest musical images, and maybe it's one of the reasons I always associated music with, healing vibes. Let's put it that way, with love, with affection, with warmth, with the beautiful things in life. Because my father did that when I was very, very young. But then these are just some random thoughts I had. And I just thought I'd share them with you. And I'm very curious to know about you all too. What are your earliest memories of music? Any kind of music. And I'm curious to know. Please share them with all of us. I think it's going to be a wonderful little topic of discussion and thread if you'd join in the conversation. So thank you so much for listening. Keep on listening, and I can't wait to hear from you. Take care.